Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dengan semangat dari semboyan Ki Hajar Dewantara, kami, Program Studi Pendidikan Bahasa Inggris Universitas Islam Indonesia, berkomitmen melaksanakan proses pembelajaran dengan mengusung 3 pilar utama, yaitu English Learning, Technology in Education, dan Global Mobility. Ini terangkum dalam tagline Learning Beyond Classroom Walls. Melihat jauh ke tahun 2030, PBI UII memiliki visi menjadi program studi pendidikan bahasa Inggris yang terkemuka di kawasan Asia Tenggara dalam bidang pendidikan, penelitian, pengabdian masyarakat, serta berkomitmen pada nilai-nilai keislaman dan keindonesiaan. Untuk mendorong terwujudnya visi kami di tahun 2030, PBI UII menyadari bahwa diperlukan peran aktif dalam menunjang kegiatan-kegiatan akademik formal dan informal mahasiswa, baik di kampus maupun di masyarakat. Kegiatan mahasiswa yang telah berjalan sampai saat ini, diantaranya praktek pengalaman lapangan di Australia dan praktek pengalaman lapangan di ASEAN yang sekaligus menjadi kegiatan unggulan kami dengan didukung fasilitas dan program PBI UII yang lain. PBI UII juga menunjang pola kerja yang kreatif, aplikatif, dan berkelanjutan secara profesional, inovatif, berbasis teknologi informasi dan komunikasi. Harapan kami, mahasiswa tidak hanya sekedar mengikuti sistem perkuliahan, tetapi bisa mendapatkan bermacam kompetensi mulai dari Information and Communication Technology, keahlian bidang ilmu seperti pedagogi, linguistik, atau ilmu bahasa, atau English Proficiency, serta keislaman, kebangsaan, dan kewirausahaan. Sehingga lulusan kami bisa mengintegrasikan dan mentransformasikan nilai-nilai Islam di bidang pendidikan bahasa Inggris. Didukung oleh tenaga pengajar yang profesional dan berkompeten, mahasiswa dapat memaksimalkan minatnya dengan baik dalam perkuliahan. Dan dalam perkuliahan yang ditempuh oleh mahasiswa, PBI UII terbagi menjadi 3 minat utama, yaitu Teaching English for Young Learners, Linguistics and Translation, English for Specific Purposes. Oleh karena itu, lulusan kami siap memenuhi kompetensi sebagai guru dan pemimpin di masa depan secara nasional, regional, dan internasional. Demikian informasi tentang program studi pendidikan bahasa Inggris Universitas Islam Indonesia. Semoga bermanfaat. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dengan semangat dari semboyan Ki Hajar Dewantara, kami, Program Studi Pendidikan Bahasa Inggris Universitas Islam Indonesia, berkomitmen melaksanakan proses pembelajaran dengan mengusung 3 pilar utama, yaitu English Learning, Technology in Education, dan Global Mobility. Ini terangkum dalam tagline Learning Beyond Classroom Walls. Melihat jauh ke tahun 2030, PBI UII memiliki visi menjadi program studi pendidikan bahasa Inggris yang terkemuka di kawasan Asia Tenggara dalam bidang pendidikan, penelitian, pengabdian masyarakat, serta berkomitmen pada nilai-nilai keislaman dan keindonesiaan. Untuk mendorong terwujudnya visi kami di tahun 2030, PBI UII menyadari bahwa diperlukan peran aktif dalam menunjang kegiatan-kegiatan akademik formal dan informal mahasiswa, baik di kampus maupun di masyarakat. Kegiatan mahasiswa yang telah berjalan sampai saat ini, diantaranya praktek pengalaman lapangan di Australia dan praktek pengalaman lapangan di ASEAN yang sekaligus menjadi kegiatan unggulan kami dengan didukung fasilitas dan program PBI UII yang lain. PBI UII juga menunjang pola kerja yang kreatif, aplikatif, dan berkelanjutan secara profesional, inovatif, berbasis teknologi informasi dan komunikasi. Harapan kami, mahasiswa tidak hanya sekedar mengikuti sistem perkuliahan, tetapi bisa mendapatkan bermacam kompetensi mulai dari Information and Communication Technology, keahlian bidang ilmu seperti pedagogi, linguistik, atau ilmu bahasa, atau English Proficiency, serta keislaman, kebangsaan, dan kewirausahaan. Sehingga lulusan kami bisa mengintegrasikan dan mentransformasikan nilai-nilai Islam di bidang pendidikan bahasa Inggris. Didukung oleh tenaga pengajar yang profesional dan berkompeten, mahasiswa dapat memaksimalkan minatnya dengan baik dalam perkuliahan. Dan dalam perkuliahan yang ditempuh oleh mahasiswa, PBI UII terbagi menjadi 3 minat utama, yaitu Teaching English for Young Learners, Linguistics and Translation, English for Specific Purposes. Oleh karena itu, lulusan kami siap memenuhi kompetensi sebagai guru dan pemimpin di masa depan secara nasional, regional, dan internasional. Demikian informasi tentang program studi pendidikan bahasa Inggris Universitas Islam Indonesia. Semoga bermanfaat. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate, and praise be to Allah, Lord of worlds. Praise and peace be upon our Master Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and all his family and companions. Your Excellency, Miss Irma Windy Astuti, the head of Department of English Language Education of Universitas Islam Indonesia, the Honorable Dr. Marcus Benevides of GF Oberlin University, Japan, Dr. Hyo-Jeong So of Ewha Women's University, South Korea, and Miss Ista Maharsi of Universitas Islam Indonesia, and all distinguished lecturers and delegates. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a wonderful and precious chance for me to be your master of ceremony today. My name is Sonia Handinulubis. I'm also one of the students in English Language Education of Universitas Islam Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the International Conference on Language, Teaching, Technology, and Culture 2020, held by English Language Education Department of Universitas Islam Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me us to read today's agenda. The first is opening, the second is the plenary session, the third is discussion, the fourth is break, the fifth is the parallel session, and the last is closing. All distinguished lecturers and delegates, to open today's agenda, let's bow our head to pray by saying Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All distinguished ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's start our plenary session today. With a very respectful speakers, there will be Dr. Marcos Benevides from GF of Berlin University, Japan, Dr. Hyo-Jeong So from Iowa Women's University, South Korea, and Miss Ista Maharsi from Universitas Islam Indonesia. This session will be moderated by our beautiful moderator for today, Miss Intan Pradita. And I will handing it over to Miss Intan. To Miss Intan, the time and screen is yours.
Okay. Thank you for the Master of Ceremony for handing it over me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I hope that all the audience here and all the speakers are blessed to be very well today. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelt because we are going to have many plenary speakers overseas that will join us in this plenary session J2. Our first keynote speaker today is Ibu Ista Maharsi, Dr. Ista Maharsi. She is currently pursuing her PhD in State University of Yogyakarta, and she has devoted herself a lot in extensive reading. So Miss Ista from the CV, she has made a lot of projects, especially in research and community service related to extensive reading and also the reflective practice of the teachers. Miss Ista has been published a lot of research works in reputable journals, as well as granted for the proposal of research and community service by Board of Academic and also from Society and Culture from Universitas Islam Indonesia. And today, Ms. Ista will also talk about extensive reading on how it will be very applicable to you, especially for the teachers. So for the audience who are now currently working as teachers and also pre-service teachers, we might have more insight on how to motivate the students, to motivate them in reading practices through giving the task. So what kind of task that will motivate the students? All right, so Dr. Ista.
Hello, Miss Intan.
Yeah, Dr. Ista, are you still muted?
No, I think I'm on. My voice. Hello.
We have not reached you yet. The voice. Okay.
Hang on.
Yeah,
I heard.
Okay.
Mrs.
It's okay. Yeah, very clear. Okay.
Okay, what about now?
It's getting better. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Dr. Ista, how are you?
Pretty good, thank you.
All right. So
How are you?
we can't wait to have more knowledge about extensive reading. So Miss Ista, without a further ado, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Miss Intan. Right. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, very clear.
Okay. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so honored to share with you about part of my study. And today I'm going to talk about task and learner motivation in extensive reading classes. So first of all, before I start my talk, I would like to ask you, how motivated are you? If you have to rate your motivation from 1 to 10, so how motivated are you today or at this moment? So probably you can write in the chat box.
Wow, it's 8 and 9. Wow.
Wow.
I
Okay,
need
so 8 and 9. Okay. Hopefully, I won't bring you down here with my presentation. All right. So, okay. So let me start. Okay, it's good that you have high motivation, and let's see whether your motivation will still be high at the end of these sessions or probably at the end of this conference. All right. So let me start. Okay, so the aim of my talk for today are twofold. So first, I would like to share with you the EFL students' perceived motivating tasks in extensive reading classes and the changes of students' motivation throughout the semester. So I will focus on those two things. And I'm going to start with extensive reading first. So probably some of you are familiar with extensive reading. And the book that I referred to when doing extensive reading is the book of Day and Bamford. And they define extensive reading as an approach to the teaching and learning of second language reading in which learners read large quantities of books and other materials that are well within their linguistic competence. So we have two keywords here. The first one is large quantities of books, and the second one is the vocabulary should be within their linguistic competence. Okay, in doing extensive reading, students have to read as much as possible. And students also select their own reading. And the most important thing is that reading should be pleasure. So students should be able to enjoy their reading. The reading materials, therefore, should be within their linguistic competence. How to do this? Well, there are some online quiz, online tests that can give us information about the level of the vocabulary of the students, and that can help us help the students to choose which book that are suitable for them. And reading is conducted individual and silent, but this is just one of the things that we can do in classrooms. But sometimes we can also read together, so teachers and students read together, and then they also share about their reading. And another important thing is that teachers are the role model. So it is not wise to ask students to read while teachers are not reading. And I attended yesterday's session with Pak Willy, and Pak Willy emphasized on this, that teachers should model the students to read. All right, so now let's move on to types of extensive reading programs. There are three types or design of extensive reading programs that are commonly implemented. The first one is pure extensive reading class. So it refers to community of reading. So they just read together, they share what they read, and there is no task and no assessment. And the other two types of extensive reading class is the credit course, which is usually compulsory for students at the universities. And the credit range between 2 to 5 credits for one semester. And the other types of extensive reading class is integrated extensive reading class, meaning that extensive reading activities are embedded in other courses. For example, reading course, writing course, critical reading and literacy, for example, or any other courses that include extensive reading activities. Well, because I also talk about tasks today, so let me share a little bit about the definition of task. And yesterday I attended, oh not yesterday, 2 days ago, I attended a workshop by Marcos. Thank you so much, Marcos. I learned a lot from your session. And Long give two definitions of task. So the first task is a pedagogic task, meaning that the activities and the materials that the teachers or the students work on in the classroom or other instructional environment. While the other task is target task, meaning that they need, or the students need to be able to do the new language. And this deals with real world activities, meaning that this is a bigger, wider scope, right? And whether extensive reading tasks in the form can be in the form of both pedagogic tasks, or it can also be in target tasks. So it depends on the design of the extensive reading. Okay, my other construct for this talk is motivation. And there are actually many definitions of motivation, and the one which is well known is Kerner. But here I take Dorney's definition of motivation. So motivation is responsible for why people decide to do something. In this case, because this is a reading class, so the reason why students read books and how long they are willing to sustain the activities, meaning that how long students can sustain their motivation to finish reading that book, for one book or probably many books during the semester. And it also deals with how hard they are going to pursue it. This could refer to the task that they are going to complete in an extensive reading class for the whole semester. All right, then. So Donnie have a definition of a task motivation. So task that relates with motivation. And there are several components here. The first one is interest. And this includes motivation, cognitive, and affective elements, meaning that students' interest covers the affective elements, and also cognitive, and also motivation. So students' interest in reading, in this case, is very important. And the next component is productive learner roles. This refers to the expected behavior in a context. This may also refer to the task, how they complete the task. So teachers expect students to complete tasks at the end of a semester, for example, or at the end of a session, for example. And then motivational flow, this is generally understood as students' involvement, students' concentration, and how much students are challenged to finish the task. And the last component, this is the most important, I guess, but rarely people pay attention to this. So vision. So vision refers to a future goal and self-image of being a successful L2 speakers or users. So we know that everybody or our students have their own goals, future goals. They have their own self-image, but rarely do teachers explore this and remind students about their future goals. So for example, in an extensive reading class, so in reading class or whatever class that you have, you could make your students' future goals alive, like reminding them, what do you want to be in the future? What do you want to be able to do in the future? what are your dreams? So this is important, and Dorney put this vision as part of their motivations. And I myself, as teachers, well, I didn't do this until I read Dorney's, so that, okay, so it is important for teachers to revive the student self-image in the future, which is, this can help students sustain their motivation in learning. Well, because this motivation is within the context of L2 reading, I also take Day and Bamford's expectancy plus value models. So in these models, students have two choices, or well, people in general. People do what they expect to accomplish successfully, so they do what they think they can succeed in it, or people will avoid doing something that they think they will not succeed. So this also refers to reading. So as we know as teachers that some of our students probably are reluctant to read because they don't like reading. They are afraid to be asked anything related with the books, for example. So if in this case, students are discouraged to read book, and it also means that the students try to avoid reading because they don't like reading. All right, so this is the illustration for the expectancy plus value models. And there are two sections here, as you can see. The first one is materials. The second one is reading ability, and this belongs to expectancy model. This material, as Dr. Willy Renandia yesterday's talk, so reading material should be interesting, and it should be within the student's linguistic level, attractive, and of course, the reading resources should be available. And then the next component is reading ability. This reading ability relates with students' self-efficacy. If students think that they can read a book and they can understand the book, so well, regardless of their reading activities, of course, they will get motivated. And this is what we are doing in extensive reading. So we try to make students interested in reading by starting reading easy things, easy books. And the book should be within their linguistic level. Another components that use this value contains of two things. The first one is attitudes, and the second one is social cultural environment, including influence of family and friends. And these attitudes, of course, this closely relates with the two components above. So when they have positive, well, they have good, not good, well, they think that they can do, they think that they can finish reading books. So they probably will have positive attitudes towards reading. And then this one, I guess, is very important in building students' attitude towards reading and also reading habit. Family and friends. So home literacy is an issue which probably we don't really, connect to a student's preparation. But based on my observations and interview with the participants in my study, all of the students that I interviewed, they have good reading culture built when they were children. So they have reading role models since they were children at home. They have their own library in their home. They always see their father, mother reading, and also brother and sisters. And this is very important in helping students to sustain motivation in reading. Okay, and here we are. So this is my first answer for my first issues that I'm trying to address today. So what kind of tasks that are perceived as motivating and extensive reading classes Okay, these three are the highest. I mean, students give very good responses on these three tasks. The first one is poster making, and then the second one is silent reading in classrooms, and the third one is outdoor reading activities. So probably this silent reading, if we are teachers, yeah, reading teachers, this silent reading could last, well, 15 to 20 minutes in the classrooms, and make sure that the teachers are also reading books, because we are giving examples. So we become reading models for the students. And outdoor reading turns to be one of the students' favorite reading activities. So in campuses, for example, they can pick their own, choose their own place where they can read, for example, in the hallway, in the canteen probably, or under a tree, or anything, just outdoors. So it will give them new atmosphere of reading. Okay, the other three tasks are book promotion. And this book promotion applies for both course and non-course classes. And then story mind mapping, and this applies in the course, extensive reading as a course, and story making. So story mind making and story making is different. Story mind making meaning that after they read the book, and then they try to mind map the story, what the story is about, and then they are going to share it with their classmates. While story making is that the students write stories, they make stories, and of course they will publish it. Okay, so if we look at those tasks in terms or in the view of input and outcome, so silent reading, outdoor reading, and accompanied by very engaging activities. So they are input. So students do lots of reading as their input, while the outcome of the reading could be in the form of making poster, book promotion, or story making, right? And then here are other activities that also have good responses from the students. So there are blind date, reading marathon, acting out, literature circle, book talk, breakout poem, etc. If you're interested in this one, well, you can text me later, because I have limited time to present here. Okay, and these are the students' project. One of the project, this is called, I would like to call this as learning artifacts. So at the end of the semester, students published their task, their project, and it could be in the form of posters, published collection of stories, reading expo or reading exhibition. They can have talk show, and then creative bookmarks. So this one, they're creative bookmarks, and a book blurb, portfolios, and there are still many more actually, but I just highlight some here. Okay, so the next questions will be, how are those tasks administered? I just give you two examples of the projects that the students did in their extensive reading class. The first one is poster making, and here are the text complexity of the poster making or the process, which starts from simple to complex. So of course, students need to read book first, but then it will be followed by follow-up activities. I know that as teachers, you are familiar with all these stages, right? But then this stage that I give blue color might be highlighted. That before students end up making posters, they should be exposed to varied reading activities. And these activities should be engaging, should grab students' attention so that they can sustain their motivation until the end of the class or the end of the program. Okay, here is another example of story making. Story making, this project is implemented in non-course extensive reading, so integrated extensive reading. So the teacher integrates reading and writing. So students are exposed with lots of reading activities, but then at the end of the semester, the students are required to construct their own, and their stories have been reviewed, revised, edited, and finally they publish their collection of stories. And this is very interesting. Students are very proud when their work are published and recognized by other people. Okay, so what do we need to pay attention when we, as teachers, design a project or publish tasks? We need to pay attention to the sequence of tasks. If yes, in Marco's session, yeah, I think Marcos will talk about this again later after this session. Tasks arranged from simple to complex, so that students can follow the complexity, and finally they are able to have their project done. And all the activities, all the tasks should be scaffolded, meaning that the teacher should continually give feedback in a support task or the main task or the target task. And then what makes this pleasing for students is that this kind of task can be used as formative or summative assessment. So it depends on the design. And then students are again very proud when their work is published through social media or their websites. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, well, I'm going to relate the task and students' motivation. And I also posed questions earlier that about your motivation. So in the beginning of this session, you probably have 8 or 9 points out of 10, but at the end of this session, you probably could have 10 or even 2 or 3, right? So this also happens when students are engaged with reading activities. I'm going to give you just 2 examples out of 9 participants that I observe and interview. And this is the complexity of their motivation. So, well, these are the motivation rates that they give during the semester. This is over a period of semester, one semester. And this one here, R, indicates reading activities, right? R1, R2, R3, until R6. What we need to keep in mind is that the number of books that the students read varied between one student to the other. But we are not going to compare between one student with the other students. We just need to see how their reading motivation fluctuates from the very beginning of the semester to the end of the semester. And I also give 2 circles here, 2 types of circle. The first one, the green one, is that this is the high motivation of the students. So meaning that when the students did 4 reading activities, so they have quite high motivation here, 10. So 10, I think that's the maximum motivation. They like doing this activity very much. But then here, this also gives us a warning that the students may discourage with their reading or their reading activities in the classroom. So we need to know what caused all this. And this is also good, right? So the students sustain their motivation, okay, quite some time, right? And here as well. Okay, what teachers expect the students have in terms of motivation and task, of course, we want the students to have this high motivation throughout this semester. So we probably hope that the students will have high motivation somewhere here, somewhere here, somewhere here, or somewhere here. But, you know, again, as Dorni mentioned, that reading motivation, yeah, fluctuates, and this is a very complex thing. It doesn't mean that when they achieve high motivation here, there's nothing happened with this. They're just happy. No, but there are also mini, I don't know, occurrence, yeah, happening there. So if we use a telescope, for example, so there will be other occurrence that influence their motivation. Okay, so this is another example of Bella's motivation trajectory, which is different, of course. Okay, now what are the implications then? What do teachers need to prepare tasks for students that can help sustain students' motivation in extensive reading classes? And this list seemed to be the ideal list, just kind of suggestions, yeah, but this is based on my interviews with the students. Vary the reading activities, and then allow students to choose, negotiate, and create, and this is important. This refers to learner autonomy. And then publish their tasks, yes, because they love it. And then challenge students to employ 21st century skills, yes. And then feedback throughout the task is very important, be it in TBLT or project-based, any types of design, right? And then provide enjoyment and satisfaction. This is easier said than done. So sometimes, yeah, we find students, don't really enjoy or do not really like the activities, but this is teachers' challenge, how to make this enjoyable and give students satisfaction in terms of learning. And I highlight two last list here: reading role model and home literacy environment. So my students that I interviewed indicate these two important roles of reading role models and home literacy environment. Until now, they still remember what their parents and their siblings did when they read together when they were still kids. So the father was reading, the mother read for the kids, right? They have their own library. When holidays come, and then they go to bookstore together, and these memories are very well remembered, and they believe that these memories, this home literacy environment help them with their reading passion or reading interest until they are now in the first year of college students. Okay, I think this is the last slides that I have. So there are several issues to ponder, but actually there are many, but I just highlight three things here. Teachers need to design extensive reading classes using the holistic lens of long-term learning, meaning that, because reading is, reading in university students is a task that the students have to deal with from the very beginning of their year in the university till they graduate. So probably if we can relate this and infuse this in our classrooms, that will help students to become avid readers, and they can read much better. And hopefully this can also help the Indonesian literacy rates, which is very low. Okay, and then the second one, it would also be important to have milestones of reading journey of the students. So in the first year, they have extensive reading class, but then in the next semester, they probably have other reading classes. Then these milestones could be made across courses. So it shouldn't be just reading classes, but it could also be related with other courses that also include reading activities. And the last one is reading journey artifacts. And this is, I think, this is a kind of collecting memories of reading, as my students indicated that they still remember the magazines that we read together with their parents. they still remember that they have books for their presents, their birthday presents. And for university students, for example, it is also good if they have their learning craft. I said craft because they can create something or produce something like bookmark, for example, and then e-books. They can write books or e-portfolios if they have e-portfolio along their learning in universities, and digital archives, etc. Okay, so well, I think that is just a little bit information from me, a sharing session from me. And then if you'd like to ask more, or well, if I can help you with extensive reading, then you can email me. Please do feel free, and you can. Thank you so much. I'm not sure whether I still have time or I still have much time. Miss Intan.
Well,
So please.
you finished it on time,
Oh,
Dr.
okay.
Ista. You are a very good teacher to motivate your student at reading, and also a very on-time person. Excellent. Okay. All right. So as a conclusion, I might say that it depends also on how the teacher create the task, isn't it? Whether the task is motivating or not, it will build the impression of reading for the students. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please keep in your mind for a while about the Q&A. We are going to continue our journey to Tokyo. So we are going to have Dr. Marcos. Dr. Marcos has been here, I think. Hello, Dr. Marcos.
Hello.
Okay, hi, we meet again.
I'm sorry. Am I on?
Yes, you are on.
Okay.
You are on. Okay.
I must apologize. It's been a very interesting week. Thank you very much for inviting me, to all the organizers, in particular Dayu, Sudi Ardini, and Intan Pradita. Thank you so much. You've been very helpful in setting everything
You're
up.
welcome. Thank you for making it today.
Yeah, thank you. But I have to admit, you know, the pros and cons of technology are such that I thought it becomes easier to juggle things, to do many things all at the same time. And so one of the things that I neglected to do this week was worry too much about my scheduling my classes, because I thought, oh, I don't need to take a whole week off since I'm not literally going to Indonesia. I thought it would be easy. And so now I'm in the position right now where I am literally teaching my class at the moment on my other computer over here.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
And
so
I've
Very multitasking.
it's a little bit too much, I think. I'm not going to try to do this again.
Yeah.
But
we do thank you for the commitment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the invitation. I've just dismissed my class, so now they're gone, and we can focus on the presentation. So again, thank you very much for inviting me, and also my apologies to the other speakers today and yesterday, because for the same reason, I haven't been able to attend any of the other sessions. And you know, it's not really good form if you're one of the plenary speakers. It's good form is to attend all the other presentations too. But again, being online, it makes it easy to multitask, and maybe that's not such a good thing about the online world. But in any case, I'll be here for the Q&A session as well later.
Yeah, but it's good that you are here right now.
I'm fully here right now, and you
okay.
have.
All right. Thank you. So maybe Marcos, I would like to introduce you first, because some of the audience have not joined your session the last 2 days. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Marcos, and Dr. Marcos is one of the lecturers in GFO Berlin University in Tokyo. He finished his EDD, your doctoral degree in Athabasca University of Canada. And what I really love about Dr. Marcos is that he loves to write English learning books. So since 2010 until now, Dr. Marcos has devoted himself to write books for English learning. And one of the books, or most of the books, have already been awarded internationally. And the current award that Dr. Marcos got is from British Council Ealton winner of course innovation about the book that he wrote about a task-based course in workplace widget incorporation. Dr. Marcos also work in Atamai Publishing, so he is very active about English materials development. Okay, and today Dr. Marcos is going to have a talk about task-based language teaching and how to assess that. The assessment, if we use task-based language teaching as a method to our practices. So without further ado, Dr. Marcos, we are ready.
Thank you very much. So, and thank you for that very nice introduction. As Intan has mentioned, I'm an assistant professor, and I also coordinate the English language program at my university in Tokyo. And I write and publish education materials. So I wear a couple of hats, and as well, recently I've been embarking on some grant-supported research on task-based assessment. And that informs the main part of my talk today. But actually, if you participated in my workshop a couple of days ago, some of the information here kind of overlaps a little bit. During the planning stage for this conference, I had in mind that I would do the plenary first and then the workshop second. But because the workshop came first, I had to introduce some of the ideas from the plenary talk. So my apologies if I cover some of the same ground, but I'll try to do it in a more efficient way this time. So I'm going to share my screen here.
Yeah.
And I'll begin the slideshow. Oops, that's the last slide. I'm sorry, just a moment. Begin from the beginning here. Okay, and I'll share my screen. Failed. That didn't work. Let me try that one more time. Share screen.
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay, that looks good. So again, this talk, as my workshop was as well, I've titled it A Case for Task-Based Language Teaching. And there are many points, of course, to be made for and against any approach, and the same is true about TVLT. And certainly within the scope of this short talk today, I can't really make a very exhaustive argument. So what I'd like to do instead is to bring your attention to a couple of fundamental concepts related mostly to how we understand TVLT and language teaching. And I'll outline as well a practical solution to assessment in particular, as Intan mentioned, excuse me. So by the end of this talk, I hope I'll have presented a simple but useful model for assessing tasks that teachers can kind of easily comprehend and easily intuitively comprehend. Because to me, this is one of the problems in implementation of task-based learning up until today, up until recently, has been a kind of complexity in understanding the approach, not only how to implement it, but also kind of the whys of why to do TVLT. And it's not entirely intuitive to many teachers. Many teachers don't quite internalize how and why they need to do it this way, or at least part of the time do it this way. So I hope to make that sort of crystal clear, not only so that you understand it, but also so that you can take the core concepts of TVLT and pass it on to other teachers who oftentimes don't get the opportunity to attend conferences and so on. So, oops, too many buttons here. So again, I'll cover a couple of three important points. One, what is TVLT, which I'll do briefly. Number two, why we need TVLT, which again, I'll do briefly, but also explaining the same model that I talked about in the workshop a couple of days ago. And finally, three, how to do TVLT, and I'll focus especially on assessment and why assessment is really important. So I hope to make TVLT more valuable, more viable, and more commonplace in the classroom, which I think is very important. So first of all, what is TVLT? Well, the principles of TVLT as laid out by Ellis and Shintani, and basically all of the proponents of TVLT have some variation on these four basic principles. Number one being a focus on meaning. Ellis and Shintani include the definition that there is a gap or a reason to communicate. There's also the idea that learners should rely on their own linguistic and non-linguistic resources, which means that they're not pre-taught how to do it before they do the task. This can sometimes be a problematic one for teachers because of course we're teaching language. So when we tell teachers we're teaching language, but don't focus on the language, it can seem a little bit like a contradiction. And so some teachers tend to resist the idea of TVLT for this reason, because of this allowance of non-linguistic resources to be used. And finally, outcome and assessment. So these four principles, like I said, are widely accepted. There's no real debate except in the margins. But I'd like to focus on three in particular, basic points. And I think we can boil it all down to, number one, priority on meaning. It's the bedrock principle for TVLT. This one is a little bit less well understood sometimes by teachers who are actually practicing and trying to do it, but it goes to the idea of task sequencing, which was mentioned as well by the previous speaker. And task sequencing becomes very important in creating lessons and in particular in making materials. This is the reason why there are not so many task-based textbooks available. And finally, the outcomes or assessment, which is I think one of the most important ideas that teachers need to really get their minds around how to do it. So again, priority on meaning, the task as a unit of measurement of instruction and sequencing and assessment, and this focus on real world outcomes and making sure that we're assessing based on those outcomes rather than assessing based on language criteria. So just in a nutshell, that is TVLT. Why do we need TVLT? And as I did a couple of days ago, I'm going to give you a little analogy, and I brought in this analogy of a cloud. And I want you to, in the workshop, we had a little bit more time to get ideas, and there were some really interesting ones that came up. But in this case, I'll simply describe what I had in mind here. Let's step back for a moment and consider language itself. How can we describe language? And one way to conceptualize language is to think of it as a cloud, something complex, something amorphous, in other words, shapeless, and something ever-changing. It's dynamic and active, and it's always changing. Like a cloud, language is complex, massive, shapeless, shifting thing. But it's something that clearly exists. It's difficult to kind of outline language and say, draw a line and say, this is English and over here is not English. It's difficult to do that very clearly. from close by, although the farther away you get from language, as from a cloud, the farther away you get, the easier it is to point to it as a unified thing on its own, right? And so they both share these qualities. We can recognize it by stepping away. We know it exists. We can make things like dictionaries, for example, that are never quite complete, and we can compare these dictionaries with other languages. We can take a cloud and look at another cloud and say that they are the same kind of thing, but they're very different from each other at the same time. Edges are undefined, which means that when languages come into contact with each other, they slowly kind of meld into each other, and so the border between them becomes even more problematic. And we can see this when we talk about, in my case, teaching in Japan, the idea of Japanese English, or words that are borrowed from English into Japanese, and words that are borrowed the other way around as well. So in other words, the closer you get to language, the closer you get to trying to define the edges, the more difficult it becomes, more problematic it becomes. But if you step away, you can say, there's one language, there's another language. And that's quite easy to do. So they bump up against each other, they borrow each other's words and concepts, they break off into new dialects, right? Clouds can break off into different clouds. They can grow larger and smaller and so on. And the size of complexity of a language, like the natural world itself, really, it's greater than we can understand all at once. It's greater than we can understand as a whole. So in order to understand it, as we do with the natural world, we try to kind of break it up into pieces so that it can be analyzed. So for example, we lay a kind of grid over language. If you're familiar with the theories of the linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, you might be familiar with this idea of laying a grid over language, a kind of structural approach to looking at language. And the reason we do this is because then we can use this grid to discuss and to teach piece by piece, a kind of grammatical grid. And I use the word grammar here, by the way, but what I really mean is a classification of linguistic forms of any kind. It could be lexis, it could be pragmatic. The point is that it's a synthetic approach that seeks to break down a complex system into component parts that then can be reintroduced to the student, to the learner, piece by piece, bit by bit. And by doing that, to create up the whole again, okay? And in 1976, quite a long time ago, Wilkins, for example, called attention to this approach to language teaching by writing, a synthetic language teaching strategy is one in which the different parts of language are taught separately and step by step, so that acquisition is a process of gradual accumulation of parts until the whole structure of language has been built up, okay? That's what he called a synthetic approach. And basically, again, to go back to this analogy, let's leave the cloud aside for a minute and look at something else that's kind of complex, which is this visual picture. And imagine that you want to break down this picture and then copy it again. So again, you can lay a grid over it so that you can then look at the component parts. And this is a trick, actually, that's used by artists in order to copy a picture or to blow up a picture. If you've got a small picture and you want to paint a big mural, artists will do this. They'll create this grid, and then they'll lay an empty grid over the part where they want to, the new picture that they want to draw. And little by little, looking from one to the other, they start drawing. And they start basically copying that picture piece by piece, little by little, until they eventually get something complete, right? You go little by little looking at each piece with a focus on accuracy in this case, and not just accuracy, but a kind of synthetic accuracy where each piece is looked at separately. From a language learning point of view, of course, the analogy here is that you are teaching bits of language little by little. So, you know, you're doing the past tense today, you're doing adverbs of frequency tomorrow, and so on. All these little pieces of the picture that one day will give your student the whole big picture. And this is a good way, don't get me wrong, this is a great way of creating something, of duplicating something, right? So if your goal is to give the students a complete, accurate, full perspective on language, this is actually an efficient way to do it. The problem with it is motivation, okay? The problem is motivation because, sorry, let me go back here for a minute. Because if you think about it, until you get to the end, you have nothing. You have nothing, right? So you've taught the past tense. Okay, I know the past tense, but I can't do anything with it, right? It's just a piece of language. I have 3 pieces of language. I have 3, I know a certain number of words, but I don't have that whole picture. And for an artist to do this, it's fine because it only takes a couple of hours to copy a picture this way. But if you are copying a whole language into your head, then there's a motivation issue here because until you get to the end, you really have nothing. And this is where task-based learning and basically a communicative approach more broadly comes in. Extensive reading actually you can apply the same kind of general analogy, right? With extensive reading, you're not waiting until you know the language very well to begin reading. You are beginning reading right away. And that's what TBLT, that's the why of TBLT, because it gives us another approach to language learning that doesn't expect us to wait for months and years until we have something. It allows us to start using the language right away. So that's the concept that you get to. The solution is a TBLT approach that prioritizes meaning over forms. And meaning, oh, I'm sorry, what happened? Am I still here?
Yeah, you're still here.
But
You
you lost my
actually
screen.
stop your share screen.
You stopped?
No,
Sure,
no.
sure.
Yeah, you
I
might
did.
accidentally stop your share screen.
I'm not sure what happened. Okay, let me.
You
Okay,
can
no.
reshare again.
Yeah, I think the problem was my Microsoft PowerPoint stopped playing. So let me open that again here.
It's okay.
PowerPoint, open. And okay. All right, now I'll share again. Sorry about that. I really don't know what happened. I didn't press anything. It shouldn't have happened.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. So what's the solution? As I mentioned before, so TBLT is an approach that prioritizes meaning over forms, and meaning depends on context, basically on seeing the whole picture. You can't have meaning looking through a pinhole, right? You're seeing part of something that's not entire meaning. Meaning is holistic kind of by nature, and it depends on context. And tasks, sorry, not tasks, but that kind of synthetic approach encourages us to look at pieces, discrete pieces of language. But if we conceptualize it in a different way, then it can give us a better model to kind of understand TBLT. So perhaps instead of thinking of tasks as small, incomplete pieces, we can think of them as whole but incomplete. Whole but incomplete. Okay? So you've got this target here, which is the language. That's where you want to get to. And of course, it's too complex for students to be able to tackle. So what we can do is create this concept of a pedagogic task, which Michael Long describes as a step towards a real-world target task. In other words, what he is saying really is that a pedagogic task should be holistic and meaningful from the beginning. It's an approximation of a real-world task, but it has to be meaningful and holistic. So how can this be done? It can be done by giving us a complete picture right from the beginning. Okay, so to go back to our cloud model for a minute, think of it as, rather than a grid that divides up the cloud, as a series of complete whole sketches, rather than a detailed study of pieces of the cloud. So in other words, this is a cloud, right? You might have to kind of squint to say it's a cloud, but it's a complete cloud. You can argue that it's a cloud. This is a cloud, right? It's not a beautiful cloud, just like our students don't speak beautiful, fully formed language yet, but it's recognizable as a thing. You can look at it and say, this is a cloud. So this is a cloud. And so a progression of pedagogic attempts at using the language that get better and better over time, the more it's practiced, the more it's focused towards that final target task. So at some point you get to this. So again, I've presented kind of two different models of looking at language learning. One is systematic and sort of synthetic. You build on pieces by piece. And the other is holistic and gives you the whole picture all at once. And TBLT is like the holistic side. Again, just to be clear, I'm not arguing that one is better than the other necessarily. It's a matter that both are required. A focus on accuracy is important. A focus on discrete pieces of language learning. That kind of progression can be very useful, very powerful way of learning. But at the same time, we need to provide the holistic picture. We need to provide the meaning for language learning as well. And that's where TBLT comes in a really effective and strong way. And so hopefully I've made that case. And actually from seeing bits of the previous presentations, I have a feeling that we are all on board anyway. I think we all agree that a communicative approach is important. So then the question becomes, how do we do TBLT? And there has been a lot of work done in this area. During the workshop I mentioned Jane Willis as a very practical writer that provides lots of different opportunities and ideas on how TBLT actually can be implemented. I would recommend reading her work with her late husband, Dave, on how to implement TBLT. Today I want to focus though on assessment, because I think assessment is the key factor to consider, because it's where teachers often go wrong. And this has been my experience here in Japan. Teachers will quite happily agree that communicative approach is important. They'll come into the classroom with great intentions and great tasks in hand, and they will come in and do very communicative, very interesting, very motivating lessons. However, they then revert when it comes time to testing, to giving a grade to the students. They often tend to revert to a more traditional approach to assessment. And that undermines, it undercuts the idea of communicativeness in the classroom. Just to give you a quick example, if you think about teaching, the past tense as an example, if you were to tell your students to prepare a task, which would be, write a report about what you did for your summer vacation. And you're hoping that they do this so that you can focus on the past tense. You then have them do it, and then you grade them based on how correctly they use the past tense. What you are doing is you are teaching them that it's the language component of that is important, rather than the holistic sense of telling a story. So you kind of undermine the whole process if you don't do assessment correctly. And it's also not intuitive, right? I think any teacher can, within 10 minutes put together a short quiz on grammar or a short quiz on vocabulary. We can all do that within a few minutes. But when it comes time to assessing the real world-like outcome of TBLT, it's a little bit more problematic. It's not intuitive for most people because that's not how we learned in school ourselves. So how do we get around that? Well, again, the focus is on that outcome. We have to focus on real world-like outcomes in order to assess based on those. And this is really important and a little bit tricky to do. Peter Skian, who is another big proponent of TVLT, has put it this way. And I think this quote is one of the quotes that has been driving my research in recent years. If task-based approaches to teaching are not complemented by task-based approaches to testing, they may well come under threat. For example, if testing is based on linguistic units and formats are used which are not communicative in nature, then teaching gravitates back towards this style. And the implication, again, this is Skian, is clear that task-based tests need to become commonplace. And task-based testing techniques have to be widely understood and operable. They have to function well, both in high-stakes proficiency testing, so for example, TOEIC, TOEFL, and so on, but also in classroom-based achievement testing. And the high-stakes proficiency testing, actually, that problem is being solved if it's not solved already. If you're not familiar with TOEIC, for example, TOEIC is a very popular test here in Japan. TOEIC has become quite task-based over the years. And now many of the questions in that test are quite appropriately task-based. It's become quite a good test. It didn't used to be so. So the problem isn't really in these formal tests that are high stakes and can be done more reliably and are more valid, but it's what happens in the classroom. This is where things kind of break down a little bit. It's the classroom testing that doesn't get done as well. And part of the reason is teachers aren't quite sure how to do it. And we have kind of conflicting templates, rubrics of how to do it. So I put this in here, not because I expect you to read it. I know it's very small, don't try to read it. But because I want to show you a sort of a sample rubric for assessing, in this case, oral presentation. And you can imagine that if you're assessing oral presentation, you have to go through this list and also select on a Likert scale what the grade is. It becomes quite complex, time-consuming, and difficult to do. And frankly, it's not a very valid way of assessing something like an oral presentation, because what you end up doing is again, itemizing. It's a kind of synthetic approach, because you're looking at things like gestures, you're looking at things like eye contact, and you're giving a score based on those. When really you shouldn't be looking at those at all, at least not on a primary level. If you consider, for example, I don't know if you've ever seen Steve Jobs, the late founder of Apple. Have you ever seen him present? I recommend, if you want to take a look at an interesting presentation, watch him presenting on the original iPod, when he first introduced the iPod. Watch his presentation. You can get it on YouTube. And the reason I say it's an interesting presentation is because if you pay attention to Steve Jobs presenting, he breaks all the rules. He breaks all the rules. He's dressed very casually. He doesn't really make eye contact. He kind of walks, he wanders around the stage, looking like he's talking to himself, right? He breaks all of the sort of conventional ways of presenting. And yet he was well known, well regarded for being one of the top sort of presenters of his time. He was a very effective presenter that helped to build Apple for that reason. So what I'm suggesting is, if you were to use a rubric like this, you would end up giving Steve Jobs quite a low score, because he's not doing things like maintaining eye contact. He's not doing things like speaking directly to the audience. And so it becomes inherently an unfair way of assessment. And so what you really need to do is to focus on that task outcome. And so what I suggest is a two-step process, with the first step being a very simple yes or no decision. Is the task outcome achieved? In other words, can you walk away from it and say, yes, that was an informative presentation, I got something out of it, right? Or is the answer no, for whatever reason? Don't worry about why. It could be pronunciation, it could be linguistic factors, but we don't worry about that now. You just decide yes or no. And then the second step, if yes, how well is the outcome achieved? If it's no, that's fine too. Then you move towards a feedback stage and you give feedback to the learner. And very importantly, you allow the learner to do it again, okay? So basically, yes, no, is it achieved? Number two, if yes, then how well is it achieved? And number three, give feedback to the learner so that they can do it again. This model may seem a little bit overly simplistic, but that's the point. What I'm trying to achieve with this kind of universal rubric for task outcome assessment is to create a model that the teacher can intuitively know in the classroom. So when you're in the classroom and you have whether it's a written assignment or anything, you can immediately decide yes, no, and then start thinking about linguistic factors. You can even bring in things like gestures and so on when you're giving feedback, but you're not going to be prevented from allowing the student to succeed if they succeed in some non-conventional way. So this is the, how am I doing for time, Intan?
Yeah, it's actually, you still have like around 5 to 7 minutes.
5 to 7 minutes, okay. So I'm going to skip over the example in that case, because I already gave it in my workshop before. But basically, this, for those of you who can watch this later and pause the video, you can take a look more closely. But basically, you set out the task here so that the student understands the parameters. I had an example here. Please watch the video from my workshop earlier if you want to see the example. I'm going to skip over it quite quickly. In this case, the student, we agreed, had an 8 out of 10 and did a pretty good job. So the questions, though, that arise from this kind of assessment, number one, by what criteria can we judge yes or no, right? That's a valid question. How can we judge whether something is adequate or not? And number two, how can we help learners to understand TBLT assessment? That's another important factor here, because if the learners are expecting you to judge their language ability, they may not understand what you're trying to accomplish here. So of course, one of the things you can do is you can have this kind of rubric as long as you're using it for feedback purposes rather than assessment at the beginning. So you're still doing that first step, which is deciding yes or no, but then you can revert back to this and give feedback from it. You can, and perhaps should, this is probably the recommended option, I would say, is to refer to language descriptor systems, can-do statements, like the Common European Framework. I'm a big fan of the Canadian language benchmarks, frankly. I would actually recommend taking a look at that one. In my opinion, the Canadian language benchmarks is much more teacher-friendly and is much more focused on what you can actually do in the classroom. The CEFR tends to be highly theoretical, and I think in some ways a little bit vague, because it wants to include all kinds of languages, whereas the Canadian version is only English or French. So, and the second question, to get back to this is perhaps the new thing for people who were at my workshop last time. How can we help learners to understand TBLT assessment? And very quickly, this is one of the things that I have been working on recently. If you're familiar with Moodle as a language learning management system, I've set up something on Moodle that helps the learners to kind of pre-evaluate before they submit their assignment. So in this case, let me see if I can write on this here. In this case, students evaluate 3 product proposals. The task is to make a product proposal. So they evaluate them first, and then after they evaluate them, they submit them, okay? After they evaluate what other students have done in the past, they then submit. So in other words, I'm doing what is essentially rater reliability training, right? I'm teaching them how to grade, but I'm doing it as a way of getting them to think about how to what the criteria are for their own project. So in other words, they have to evaluate 3 product proposals. This is set up on Moodle, so they go by themselves step by step through this process. They evaluate 3 other proposals. This gives them some criteria that they're using. So here we have an example, right? So they look at the first example, which is this. This is the product proposal task that they're going to be doing. It's a writing task. And they give it a score. Is it complete? Yes. Is it clear to understand, and so on? They give it a score. Maybe they write some feedback, and they even give it a grade if they like. Okay. And then they move on to the next page on Moodle, which, oops, didn't work. Next page on Moodle, it didn't work again. Here we go, which provides them what the teacher's feedback actually is. Okay, so they grade it, and then they see what the teacher in a previous class has given. And this is the feedback from the teacher. Very good work, it's complete, easy to understand. The teacher gave it a B, and the student can then think, okay, I gave it a C, but the teacher gave it a B. Maybe I'm being too harsh, maybe I'm being too, in terms of reliability, it helps the student to see what's necessary. Then they do it again. They do another one. They take a look through it, they give it a score, and again, they see what the teacher gave, and they consider that. So they do this as a build-up to finally doing their own assignment. Okay? So at the end of this little mini assignment that I've set up for students on Moodle, now it's your turn to submit a product proposal. So they have done this, they now come here, and they submit their own product proposal. And because of the way Moodle is done, you can actually, they can actually check these boxes as they go. So this helps the students to kind of get themselves acclimated into the idea of TVLT assessment by doing a little bit of assessment themselves and then submitting the work. It allows them to kind of have a model and allows them to see what you as a teacher are looking for. And that's it. I've got a couple of things I could also add to this, but I'm going to stop here because I think I'm out of time.
Okay. Well, this is very comprehensive, and we can, for those audience who have been with you the last 2 days, also find it more enhancing, because it is not only how to assess, but also forms of the assessment itself. You provided more than what you had in a workshop in the last 2 days. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I haven't been watching the chat. I'm terribly sorry about that. So I'm seeing a couple of comments here. I'll be back for the question and answer. Actually, I don't have to be back. I'm basically here. I guess I can actually watch the next presentation. So maybe I'll stop talking. We'll do the next one, and then we'll do. All right.
Yeah. Maybe you can check the latest chat. I think it's from Bapak Ahmad Mahfur. It's not really a question, but it's a kind of comments for you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will move to the next speaker. From Tokyo, we are going to go to Seoul, South Korea. Dr. Hyo-Jeong So, 안녕하세요. Am I pronounce it right?
Thank you.
Okay. Hi.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah. Good to see some familiar faces here. Is the sound okay?
Very okay.
All right.
And you look very pretty as well.
Thank you. The transition was a little bit faster. I couldn't. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me to the conference. So when everybody is ready, I'm ready to present my presentation as well.
Okay, maybe I will introduce you first to the audience. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Hyo-Jeong So. He currently a full professor in the Department of Educational Technology and the director of the Center of Innovation in Education in Ewha Women's University. I'm sure that the audience who are keen into K-drama and hospital players, Iwa Women University's hospital become the place for, for the set. And Dr. Hyo-Jeong So is currently and pursuing her PhD in the Department of Instructional System Technology at Indiana University. And previously, she worked in Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. So yesterday we had Pak Willy Renandia from NTU as well, Dr. Hyo-Jeong So. And Dr. Hyo-Jeong So has devoted herself in research and community service as well upon technology, and the research projects have been supported by external international organizations such as Korea Research Foundation and Microsoft and also UNESCO. For the publication, if you check in the Google Scholar, Dr. Hyo-Jeong So have published more than 40 SSCI papers, and she won Best Paper Award from the Korea HCI Conference. Okay, so a lot of things. We love to have you, Dr. Hyo-Jeong So, today. And maybe I can also greet one of Dr. So's research partner here, Ibu Arifah Drajanti. Ibu Arifah, are you here? Okay, Ibu Arifah may be still somewhere. Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, good to see you, Arifah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Ibu.
Dr. Hyo-Jeong So will have a talk about how to incorporate the formal and informal learning by using technology. So without further ado, the screen is yours, Dr. Hyo-Jeong.
Thank you. And I was told that I have given about 40 minutes for my presentation. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. Just set the time. All right, so thank you for the introduction, and let me share my screen. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to my session. And the title of my presentation is about how to bridging formal and informal learning experiences through technology. To confess, I was confused with the conference date. So yesterday I logged in and listened to the lecture from NIE a little bit. Yeah, so yeah, I was confused with the date. So again, I'm back to the conference. A little bit about myself. And I'm working at Ewha Women's University. You can see the picture. And then I've been working in Singapore as well before coming back to Ewha. And my research focused on pretty much about how to use emerging technologies for knowledge building and also collaborative learning as well. So this is the outline of my presentation today. So considering this COVID-19 happening now, so I want to talk a little bit about the challenges in teaching and learning during COVID-19. And then I will move to the key idea of seamless learning with technology. And then I will give you some concrete cases about how we can bridge formal and informal learning through technology. So to do that, I will use some cases from the project I did in Singapore and Mongolia and Indonesia, my research partner, and Korea as well. So I will conclude with some of the reflections and the lessons that I learned from my research project. So teaching and learning during this very challenging time. And so I want to start with this question, like what was the most challenging when you teach or learn online during COVID-19? So I think initially we were quite challenged by the change of the mode from face-to-face to online, completely online learning environment, which we haven't really experienced before. But now I feel we are getting used to it. Yeah, so now it's a concern is about how we can go back to the normal life. So throughout the year, I feel that we've been navigating between what is possible and what is not possible. So through the experiences of teaching your classes or learning online. Sorry?
It's okay. It's just
okay. All right. So we've been keep checking. Oh, is it possible or what is not possible, right? And in fact, this COVID-19 really changed the way that we teach and learn. And according to the statistics published early this year, almost 90% of the schools were affected by COVID-19. And what is interesting for me is some of the statistics showing here is that on average, students are losing more, like 63 days. So they are supposed to go to the school and they learn, but they are losing like 63 days now per academic year. And also another very interesting statistic is the burden for parents, because they have to take care of their children who couldn't go to the school, especially the working mothers. And they feel like they are working extra 27 hours per week for childcare and then doing some housework and also checking their children's assignment and things like that. So 27 hours is quite a lot. When you think about it, we work like 8 to 9 hours on average per day. So the report says that it's like having another job. So I want to share briefly what happened in Korea this year. So of course, there was some top-down guidelines from the Ministry of Education, how the school teachers need to do the teaching online. So basically, they give the 3 guidelines, the 3 types of online classes. For example, you can teach real time, or you can use what is available as a learning content, or you can give them some kind of assignment and then do the online class in their way. Of course, you can do the combination of the 3 types. So what happened is also we did 0 rating. So anyone who want to use educational data, going to the website or watching video clips, they don't really have to pay for their internet usage. So this is the website provided by the ministry. So in fact, in Korea, we've been using this online platform a lot, even before COVID-19. So, but again, this became main learning platform for teachers. Before it was more like a supplementary and, if you want, you can use it, but it's not really a core element. But this year it became really core element, and also because these online learning contents were designed according to the school curriculum. So you can search by the subject and also you can search by the grade level. So it was very easy for teachers to integrate. Another thing that I found very interesting and encouraging is this kind of bottom-up approach from teachers. So there's a site called Hyo-Jeong, that means the school is on. And then this is like a teacher community where teachers can share their lessons. So this time, I think we really have to work together. And then whenever you have a great lesson ideas that you try with your students, this is the community that you can share, get comments. And so it was very lively teacher community. So what will happen after we go through this challenging period? Many predictions are happening now, but some predictions are not really positive, such as increased learning poverty. So I look at the report provided by World Bank, and then they share these 3 scenarios, what's gonna happen to the students. So you can see this is a normal curve. So if everything goes normal, this is the curve that students should show in terms of their ability levels. So the first scenario is the curve is this blue one. That means their score is going lower. We can't expect the same level because, as I mentioned before, they lose many days in the school, so average score will be lower. Another scenario is high standard deviation. So it means you have a very wide range of student ability. And the last scenario is increased dropout. So this is the last scenario's curve. That means students are below average. There are a lot of students below average, and there will be a lot of students dropping out. Yeah. So the scenario is not really positive. And to share a little bit more about what's going to happen after COVID, the post-COVID-19. So the one thing we can pre-sure is the adoption of blended learning. In fact, I'm back to teaching on campus now. So in Korea, the universities are back to normal classes. But I also have to accommodate students taking classes online. So very, very challenging. You have to take care of the students in class and also online as well. And there will be new forms of blended learning happening. The second prediction is home-based learning. And also there will be more responsibility for teachers, as I shared before with the statistics. Then parents will demand more flexible working environment. So I assume the industry will be changing to accommodate these flexible working environments. The last prediction is we have to redefine the role of physical schools and also the role of teachers as well. And it's likely that we are not going to follow the fixed routines anymore, like at 8 o'clock you go to school, and then you take classes every 15 minutes, you end by like 4 p.m. That kind of fixed, very time-bounded learning may disappear. And it gives more choices for students as well. So we have to adapt to this kind of predictions. And my last prediction is seamless learning. And learning will be very flexible, and then it's not confined to the school anymore. So learning across time and multiple places will be very common after COVID-19. That brings to my core idea of the seamless learning supported by technology. And I'm not sure whether you know this event happened in Korea, the AlphaGo shock in Korea. It's a few years ago, 3 to 4 years ago. And then this Google developed this AI AlphaGo machine. And then this guy is supposed to be the best Go player in the world. And then they compete. And then you probably know that who won? AlphaGo won. I think this guy only won once. Yeah. So after watching this AlphaGo event, people were very worried about it. Technology is more powerful than we think, right? And so there are two perspectives about when we talk about technology in education. So technology as a replacement and also technology as a transformation. The initial reaction from AlphaGo is that people are very worried because they may think that my job will be replaced by robots or machines. I may lose my job. Teachers are worried as well. These days there are so many intelligent applications coming to the class, and then these machines can teach. And what will be my role as a teacher, right? So we tend to think from this replacement perspective, but we cannot worry too much, right? We have to do something. So I see more possibility from this perspective, technology as transformation. So think about technology as something that will help you, and also things that you couldn't do as a teacher, all right? So technology can transform the way that you teach, right? So this field called technology enhanced learning, so TEL. So in fact, there are many types of technologies that are entering into this education sector. And then I list a few names here, which you may be familiar with. But another question that comes to mind is that, okay, there are so many technologies out there, but are they really changing the way that we teach and learn in meaningful way, right? And it's not easy. It's not easy because of the first thing that I mentioned earlier. People tend to think that technology is going to replace. So they tend to have very negative perspective. The second thing is people tend to focus too much on technology itself, right? And then they forgot about what is the actual questions that we want to tackle with the technology, right? Virtual reality, which is a very good technology, but what kind of educational problems that we can tackle with virtual technology, that is more important. So my research question, my actual question that I want to answer with in the field of technology integrated learning is how we can extend learning experiences beyond the four walls of the classroom. Learning is happening anywhere and any place. And also how we can make these different learning experiences more connected. So that became my core research for the past years. So I did some project in Singapore, Mongolia, Korea, and Indonesia, which I will present in this presentation. Okay, so this figure shows that how much time that we spend outside of the formal education system. And pretty much you can see this blue part is where this orange part is the time that we spend in the school. So throughout your life history, the time that you spend in school is probably 20 to 30% maximum, right? And then 70% of your time, the lifetime, is spent outside of the school. And also you need to think about what you do after you graduate school as well. So it's called lifelong and also life-wide learning. And here is the concept of seamless learning. And you can guess the meaning from this slide. And it's been more than a decade since this term came out. And it came out when we go for one-to-one computing. This is the time that the iPhone came out and smartphones came out, and people were finally, they have one device, for their own use. And then because this is possible, the one-to-one computing is possible, what we can do. So we think about how we can connect this formal and informal learning, and also individual and social learning as well, and learning in different places, physical and also digital spaces as well. So you can check the definition here. And the similar definitions are here, terms are here, like people sometimes call like crossover learning, free choice learning, or long tail learning as well. But basically, these terms mean same thing. And this is the framework that I published in 2008 to better understand seamless learning. And my focus was on mobile learning, so seamless mobile learning. And basically, you see four possibilities here. So the first is you can pretty much think about like whether learning is happening in class or outside of the class. So based on the physical settings, in class or out of class. And another dimension is intentionally. Is learning happen because my teacher asked me to do? Or is the learning happen because I want to do it, right? Intentionally. So the school education is type 1. It's planned, okay, planned by the curriculum, planned by teachers. It happens in classroom. If you bring the students of the field trip, that's type 2. It is still within the curriculum, it's planned, but it happens out of the classroom. And the type 3 is happening outside the classroom, but you do it because you want to do it. It's more like an interest-driven learning. And the first thing is, it happens in the school, but it's not about really the curriculum or what teachers are teaching. Think about students. They learn things besides the lesson time. So informal learning can happen in formal learning space as well. So this may give you some ideas. Seamless learning can happen in these 4 different types. So testing. This picture was taken last year around this time when I traveled to Peru. Arequipa is the old capital in Latin America. I went to a church, very beautiful church, Catholic church. I saw, assuming he is the teacher, this group of students. Type 1, 2, 3, 4, which one? Type 1, 2, 3, 4, which one is it? You can type in the chatting or you can say it. Type 1, 2, 3, 4. Type 1 or type 2, 3, 4. Learning happens in the Catholic Church. This teacher is explaining this painting, and I assume this part of the curriculum. Yes, type 2. Yeah. And this is my another trip. It seems like I've been traveling a lot. I went to Amsterdam and visit Hyo-Jeong Museum. And then I really enjoy the time there because they provide this mobile guidance, which I can listen to it. Okay, and I learned a lot about his paintings and his life history as well, which I've been loving his paintings a lot, and I learned things that I didn't know before. Is it type 1, 2, 3, 4? Which one is it? My learning at the Hyo-Jeong Museum. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which one? Type 4, 3? Which one? Yeah, type 3. Because it's happening outside the classroom. It's driven by my own interest. No one asked me to do it, right? So this will give you some ideas about how we can understand different types of learning. Okay, let me skip this one due to the time. And also, if you are interested about this formal and informal learning and how technology can be used to bridge, I published one article. It's a review article with my 2 researchers, co-researchers from Croatia. So I recommend you to read this article. And one thing we found out is that many informal learning happening in online social learning environment, which I'm going to share with you as well. Okay, so let's talk about how we can bridge formal and informal learning. And when I was in Singapore, I spent about 7 to 8 years teaching there. And Singapore is very focused on this kind of systemic change. And if they want to change, changes are very easy because the country is small. And then they have a very good systemic change elements in place. So for example, macro level is what ministry does. And micro level is more about school, the teachers and students and things like that. And also we call meso level is where the researchers or IT companies and those people working with ministry, also working with the teachers, all right? So when I say meso level actors, you can think like someone like me or someone coming from the companies, and things like that. So middle people. And so I did a future school project in Singapore, and then I worked with some of the very innovative schools. So when I went to this future school in Singapore, what we have emphasized is this co-design approach. So we didn't really want to teach the teachers. We want to create something together because teachers know what is happening in their classroom at the ground very well. So we did this co-design approach. So we have teachers to design their own lessons with mobile devices. So it's more than 10 years ago. So the picture may look a little bit outdated, but this was the lesson created by the teacher in primary school, propositions, right? Before going into this mobile learning, the teacher tend to teach propositions in a very dry way, and the students have to memorize in a way, in, on, over, under, in front, and behind, right? But since they have a mobile device, one-to-one mobile devices, so what teacher try is ask teachers go around the school and then take pictures that indicate the meaning of these propositions. So you see the students are performing, yeah, and then they try to show their understanding, right? So these students took a picture that shows probably under, right? And this group of boy, doing it, and probably over, yeah. So they took around, come back, and they share their pictures. Very simple activity, but it is also part of seamless learning. Okay, this is type 1, 2, 3, 4. I keep asking, this is still type 1, yeah, type 1, because it happens in the classroom, in the school environment, but you can go beyond your classroom and use the space in the school. And let me go let me share some of the project I did in Mongolia. So I did this project in Mongolia, and in Singapore, everything was possible because they have a lot of funding, and every student has their own devices provided by the school. It was very rich environment. But when I went to Mongolia, I realized that the schools even do not have their textbooks available, right? And then they don't even have the internet connection. So I have to come up with something, some solution, but it doesn't require new resources. So my natural solution is I have to use things they already have, right? And then it became that most of them have mobile phone, whether it may not be smartphone, but they have mobile phone. And they use social media a lot. The Mongolian people use social media a lot. Even I met a teacher over 60 years old. She is very active in Facebook, right? So I decided to use these two devices or two resources for my project. And also I have to work with the teachers to design. I work with English teachers. And they really want to make their lessons very interactive. And we incorporate this idea of gamification, gamifying learning activities. So I gave this kind of design tool to the teachers. And then when they design activities for their English lessons, I asked them to think about these 4 principles. Is the activity authentic? Does it require collaboration? Since we want to use mobile devices, does it linking learning within and beyond classroom? Does it involve multiple language skills? That means not only just reading or writing, but it should involve multiple language skills. Also, activities can be very diverse. Performative activities is more like applying, direct application. And also you can ask students to do some new experience. They can generate something new, or they can be more creative as well. So we give them a wide range of activities possible. And this is the thing that the teacher did. So, after teacher create the activities for her English lessons, she went to check whether she meet the principles, and the activities are meeting some of the principles here. It's more like a reflection tool. And so what she did, she is the teacher that I work with, English teacher. And then this is the thing posted online in Facebook. Again, they didn't have a learning management system. So the only thing that we can use as like LMS, learning management system, was Facebook. So she posted activities that the students have to do online in Facebook. For example, I think it's the time they learn about the tradition and the costume. and asked the student to do these 3 things. And then students took the pictures. I was surprised they were very active and involved their parents and then siblings to do the activity together. It's like home-based learning. Speaking is very important in language education, but students do not really have enough opportunities to practice. So she did. This is what's the homework. The students have to watch this video clip, and then they have to meet with their friend and then do the role play, imitating the speaking in this video clip. And then I think it was about shopping. And then these 2 boys, they tend to pretend like one is a customer, one is a salesman, and then they practice and they share the video clip on Facebook. This was the most popular activity shared by the students. So again, this was a speaking activity, and she was my research assistant. So she did a kind of demo video that introduced your favorite animal. So she showed her pet and then talk about her pet. And then these children, they tend to have their own pet, and then and so we didn't really expect a lot of postings happening, but these primary school children, they want to show their pet, so that we had a lot of postings happening here in Facebook. Oh, everything has to be in English, all right? So even the comments and the things they say in the video clip have to be in English. So when you do this kind of activities, you can think about gamification, all right? You don't really want just do it as a homework. You want them to submit some quality assignment. So we emphasize that it is very important that you complete the assignment, but also you have to put some quality input inside. So we did this kind of like a point system, and then we reward them at the end of the semester as well. So it was a very fun activity and engaging students through gamification, which I think you can pretty much implement very easily in your classroom. And lastly, I want to talk about my project in Singapore, in Indonesia, in Indonesia. And also my research partner is in this presentation as well. So when I came to do my project in Indonesia, it was the project for English teachers. And then 2 key items in our project was multimodal literacy and TPAC, the technological, pedagogical content knowledge. And multimodal literacy came to my mind. I mean, I'm not a language education teacher or instructor. Also, language education hasn't been my main research area. But thinking about technology or technology integration, I found that language education is a really promising area. There are a lot of things that we can do with the technology to teach language much better and much fun. And I came across this idea of multimodal literacy. So literacy, the way that we read and write has been changing with incorporation of a lot of digital technology or media that we use in daily basis. And so there are a lot of terminologies out there. Yeah, I found like some people say media literacy, visual literacy, or digital literacy, multimodal literacy, multiliteracy, and things like that. But we want to focus on multimodal literacy. And you can find the definition here. And basically it's a multimodal. So that means you have to combine 2 or more modes, okay, of meaning. Text is one thing, all right, but image can convey a meaning as well. Sound convey a meaning, even movement, yeah, can convey a meaning as well, right? There are a lot of things that you can use to convey a message, right? So multimodal literacy came to as a core element of our project. Another thing is about TPEC. I guess many of you have already heard about this framework, technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge. This is the framework that what teachers have to know as their knowledge base. So in the past, the teachers tend to have just these two types of knowledge. Content knowledge is what to teach, and the pedagogical knowledge is how to teach. So when you receive your teacher training, you basically learn about what to teach and how to teach, right? And the combination of that is PCK, we call PCK, the pedagogical content knowledge. And also you probably learn how to use tools, right? Technology tools, so that's a TK. But even though you have this TK, PK, and CK, designing technology integrated lesson is not very easy, right? So what this framework is saying is that this area where these three types of knowledge, collapse here. So what you need is you think about what you want to teach. Let's say grammar. And you think about what is the best way of teaching this grammar, pedagogical knowledge, right? And then also you have to think about what is the best technology that can support me to teach grammar much better or much easier and much more effectively. So this is the logic that you have to go through. So you have to think these three things together: content and pedagogy and technology, all right? And so based on these two ideas, multimodal literacy and TPEC, so we did several workshops with the teachers. I assume some of the teachers are at the conference as well. Sorry that if I'm sharing the things that you created without your permission. Okay, so the name is here. I forgot to hide it. Yeah, it was the lesson created by teacher Annie. And I think it was the time the Asian Games happened in Indonesia. So she wanted to tie this lesson to what is currently happening at that time. And so she designed this news item text on sports heroes of Asian Games. Okay. And we used TED Ed as a platform. If you don't know this platform, this is really convenient, very easy to use platform if you want to create this kind of multimodal video-based lesson. And then you can incorporate this kind of video clip very easily. It goes by stage, okay? It's very easy to create. Another teacher is it's more focused on the speaking, so making a hotel reservation in English. So firstly, the students should learn how to make a hotel reservation through the video clip. And then in the Think Deeper section, she gives kind of a task that students have to, practice. So think about when you are, you go abroad and then you want to book a hotel reservation and then practice. They have to practice based on the lesson. Okay. So what is a good thing about this kind of lesson is that it is important that you provide multimodal lessons to your students, but it is very important that you ask students to create multimodal artifacts as well, right? So these are the artifacts, the basically video clips created by the students. So you see the students, create this video clip. And again, everything was in English. The students have to practice and explain in English, and they go around the city and then talk about it. Explain. I think it was like a touristy places that people can go. Yeah. So multimodal literacy, and the last thing that I want to emphasize is about assessment. In language education, I assume assessment is very important, and then we tend to test students' knowledge in a very dry way, pencil-based, tasks, and whether you memorize certain things, right? But when we adopt this multimodal literacy idea, the way that we teach should change as well. So for example, if you give the assignment like this one, and then if you test their language skills in a memory-based test, your pedagogy and the way that you assess is not consistent, right? So you have to come up with this kind of rubric that better evaluate what students have done. So this is not that something I have created. It is done by other researchers, but you can get some ideas from here. This kind of rubric that you can focus on their language ability, and also visual design because it's multimodal lessons, and auditory design as well. So it became like a multimodal or multimedia kind of rubric as well. And some assessment items that you can try in your classroom if you want to do multimodal assessment. For example, you can give them this kind of advertisement, and then so give this kind of question: what is this the advertisement about? And then what is the evidence in the design that you support your assessment? And in fact, I think the design of this advertisement is to kind of advocate the disabled people, and then you see that the stairs are not really accessible to them. All right, it's a decoding question, and the students have to write their own answers below. And the next question is a decoding question, right? Decoding question. And you give this kind of descriptions, and then you can read the descriptions. And as you read these descriptions, you imagine what is happening, this old woman, right? And the way that you can check whether students really understand what's happening in this story is, how about you draw a picture that describe this scene or this story. And then you can give them some kind of, you can also share the rubric as well. The students can draw based on this rubric. Again, this is another way of checking the student understanding as an encoding question. And I'm almost done. Yeah, and the last one is something similar, but you show video clip. You see how I'm progressing. So picture, also text, and lastly the video clip. You can give them a video clip. I really like this song, Lava, the Disney movie, and then this song has a story as well. This song has a story, Lava. I think Lava wants a girlfriend. I went to YouTube before coming to this session, and then someone made a comment: Lava has a girlfriend, but I don't have a girlfriend. Things like that. Anyway, so after watching this short movie, the students can make comics, and then share their understanding about how they interpret this song. So this kind of comics of Lava Ronnie, and then Lava had a girlfriend at the end. All right, so what I did in Korea, this is not really related to language education, but I just want to share the idea that you can also thinking about using games in the classroom. And this is the project I did with Microsoft. And when I say games, I'm not talking about playing games. It's more about designing games by the students. And so this is, these days, there are many platforms out there, the programs out there that don't really require students to have coding skills. So designing games became really easy for students. So although this is an example from the science lesson, I guess you can try this kind of game design activity in language education. For example, the vocabulary game or pronunciation, they tend to make mistakes, and then they can design a game by themselves. So the last point I want to share with you. So in this presentation, I share many possibilities that you can try in language education with the use of technology. But it may not be that easy. We always see these issues when we want to change from old paradigm to new paradigm. And it is very important that you have some belief or about the possibility, what can be possible with the use of the technology. So I just want to emphasize that these kind of issues are very natural, all right? So don't be discouraged by the problem that came to your classroom or when you teach with the technology. And connecting or bridging learning experiences in formal and informal learning is very important, but it's still very disconnected. So I see a lot of possibilities through the use of technology. I think we can do better. So remember the sea of blue, the almost 70% of the time we spend outside of the classroom. So think about, so don't confine your teaching only in the classroom environment. Think about what can be done outside of the classroom. Find the missed opportunities. And also engage students in the learning activity. Engage them as the designer of their learning experiences. And they can learn much better and they will remember much better as well. Okay, so that's my last point. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hyo-Jeong So. It gives us a kind of reflection upon what happened right now, and also how will it give impacts after maybe COVID-19 ends. So home-based learning and then seamless learning, that can be a possibility for us in teaching English or other subjects as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right. So ladies and gentlemen, we come into the Q&A session. You may type your question in the chat box and I will read it for you. I think the very first question comes from Bapak Hairazi. Yeah, I think Bapak Hairazi seems so interested to the materials from Dr. Hyo-Jeong So. He asked, okay, well, it's quite long. The increasing use of digital technology has changed the way English is learned and taught. So what do you think about, can English teachers judge that using technology in their EFL classes is able to employ student-centered learning or teacher-centered learning paradigm? Yeah, will technology be effective in a way that it enables teachers and students to employ student-centered learning?
Yeah, I think kind of the power of technology is that you're giving tools to the students. Mm-hmm. And so they became the owner of their learning experiences. Yeah, so they design their own learning and they have more agency in the learning process. So it became more student-centered learning. But I also want to emphasize that we shouldn't be against the teacher-centered learning paradigm either. Sometimes you have to be the center of your lesson. So it's a matter of the balance. Sometimes you should be the one giving direct instruction or teach them the basic knowledge that students have to learn, right? But what we have to be careful is that you are not the only one learning. You know, you need to give some agency to the students so they can take more responsibility. So it's more about the balancing between teacher-centered and the student-centered.
Okay. So technology might contribute as a tool, but it's also the teacher who can make the students or to develop the learning agency of the students itself.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And to add on, in fact, this is the one that I'm trying in my graduate school. The best time that you learn is when you teach. Yeah. So this is something you can try in your class as well, right? So ask students to teach, their classmates or whatever. Yeah. So and they may be able to learn much better. Yeah.
Okay. And so after we know that we are the key actually to employ how technology will support learning agency of the students, then the learning tools can be anything, isn't it, Dr. Hyo-Jeong So?
Yeah. So
But
are we going to the next question?
Yes, that's the next question is about the learning tools.
Uh-huh.
The learning tools that are appropriate for student-centered learning and teacher-centered learning.
Yeah. We say there are two types of technology: knowledge delivery or knowledge transmission or knowledge creation. So knowledge transmission is more like a delivering tools. So if you think about, like presentation tools, it's more about the delivery tool, right? So that's for teacher-centered learning, which we need, right? But if you want to adopt more student-centered learning, you need to use knowledge creation tool, right? So it's more like an open platform, right? Open platform, and the students go in there and they create something to show their understanding, right? So that is more student-centered learning tool. So teacher-centered learning tool is more like a delivery. So it may have like all the English content inside, right? And it's a matter of for you to deliver the content inside. The student-centered learning tool, maybe the content is not there. So it's for students to go in there and then create the content. Yeah. So that may give you some ideas. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the tools can be varied then. It is not stick on one type of tools, but it depends on how it's the approach, like what you said before, whether it is knowledge delivery or knowledge transmission or knowledge creation. Okay, so Doctor, so one more question. I think this is from student. Since you mentioned about creating story and also video clips, will that be also possible to create memes? Do you know memes, Dr. Hyo-Jeong So?
Memes meaning?
Memes is like a funny picture, having humor, sometimes having humor in a picture.
That would be great, as long as it relates to the topic they are learning.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be creative. Yeah, so I love to see that as well. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I think that's the question for Dr. Hyo-Jeong So are there. The next question is for Dr. Marcos. Marcos, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Yes, okay. Marcos, there's a question for you. What types of English syllabus do the Japanese high schools or secondary schools education mostly follow and implement? Is it tightly to the government curriculum or somewhat loosely prescribed?
I would say that it's fairly loosely prescribed, but they do have very clear guidelines that have to be followed. The ministry in Japan has been quite good, I think, in the past 20 years or so in trying to push for a more communicative approach in the classroom. The problem in Japan, and probably this is the same problem in Korea and some other places as well, is that the entrance examinations to the universities kind of undermine any attempt from the government to create communicative approach. So for example, about 20 years ago, I was teaching in a high school, And there were these new courses that were suggested called oral communication A and oral communication B. This was a directive from the government to implement oral communication. And I was in charge of teaching some of these courses. But what actually happened is my students would not have time to actually do those things that we were trying to do communicatively because they had to study for their entrance examinations to get into university. In recent years, that has changed a little bit because as you may know, the birth rate in Japan has been going down, and it has relieved some of the pressure to get into university. It has become a little bit easier for more people to get into university. And at the same time, the entrance examination system, which has long been seen as the problem, as the real problem, has been changing a little bit. So actually from this year or next year, I'm not quite sure, universities are now allowed to use outside testing. So for example, the ACAN test and other tests that are a little bit more valid, and importantly, some of them can be computer-based. And because of advances in AI and other computer technologies in recent years, it's now increasingly possible for universities to have tests that include kind of maybe computer-mediated speaking, which was never possible before. So the tests used to be very grammar heavy. And so for that reason, instruction ended up being very grammar heavy. And that was the point I was trying to make earlier about assessment, because if you're not assessing in a valid way according to communicative principles, you're undermining the whole instructional process, and instruction reverts back to being all about grammar because that's what gets tested and that's what everybody's interested in. So yeah, to go back to the original question, yeah, the government they do have very clear guidelines, but I would say that the Japanese guidelines have been quite good in the last 20 years. The problem hasn't been the guidelines. It's been outside factors that have been affecting instruction.
I see. Okay, I think it answers Ibu Irma's question related to how the curriculum and high school curriculum in Japan. Okay, well, we have a question that's quite long. Ibu Puji, could you directly share the question to Dr. Marcos?
I've read the question. Maybe I can rephrase it as I answer.
Okay.
I don't, off the top of my head, have an example of research that will answer this, but I'll get back to you by email. If you want to email me,
sure.
I'll take a look and reply. But if I can just generally answer, so the idea would be this idea of doing the complete task at the beginning of the task cycle. So in other words, when you're presenting a task to students, to give them some kind of model of what it is they're going to be doing. And this is accepted practice, giving some kind of complete model rather than giving them a language lesson, right? Okay. So that is what you should be trying to do. And I think maybe the angle to approach is what kind of model is going to be beneficial. If you give a model, if you give a complete task in the sense of a model that is very authentic, you may undermine student motivation. If you give them something at a very high authentic level, they may look at that and think, oh, there's no way I can do that. If you give something that was accomplished by other students, perhaps in the past, like the example I was showing, that may be a little bit more achievable for them, but it's still a completion of the task, that could be perhaps a little bit more motivating. But in either case, you're helping them by giving them an idea of what the outcome is going to look like. So that is always helpful, rather than starting out with a language lesson, right? Give them an example. Well, one of the things that gets overlooked in task-based learning is that having the students do something and perhaps not achieve it completely is part of the it's part of the concept, right? Have them try to do a task, perhaps they can't achieve it because they're missing some crucial language form or some other reason. Then the teacher intervenes and says, here, try this. And then they try the task again and hopefully succeed the second time. So this task cycle becomes really important. We have a tendency as teachers to think, I'm going to set up my students so that they'll do the task perfectly the first time around. And that's not always possible. And I think it's not really desirable in a language learning environment necessarily. Have them try to do something and then go, I couldn't quite do it, because now it's the point of need. It's the point where you can tell them, well, try this. And then they try it and then they succeed. And I think there's a higher likelihood that they'll learn at that point. So the cycle of potentially not achieving, I hate to use the word fail, because fail, it has negative connotations, but rather than fail, think of it as, you know, not quite achieving, but doing it again, and then better and better each time. But I'll get back to you on email. If anybody wants to email me with a question like this about specific research and so on, I can get back to you at a later time too. Thank you.
Okay. So Ibu Puji, I think you can manage to have an email interaction for this TBLT research.
I'm
Here,
writing
I'll
him an
put
email
my-
already. I'm in the middle of writing him an email.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That was quick.
Yeah, and yeah, I also think that your rubric, yeah, your assessment rubric is a kind of breakthrough in our daily routines of TBLT application, because usually when it comes to speaking, then we will use such rubric that you presented, like gesture, grammar, accuracy, fluency, and things like that. Yeah, so yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
And
I'll try to
yeah,
shift the
Marcos,
focus.
when Intan mentioned about Athabasca University, it came across with me with this book, Theory and Practice of Online Learning. It's based on Athabasca University application.
Yeah, a couple of things about Athabasca, by the way. Intan very kindly said that I finished I didn't finish the degree there. I actually withdrew, so I'm not really in the program anymore. It's a great program. I highly recommend it. It's distance learning program, but I have actually withdrawn from the program, so I'm not associated with them anymore. But an excellent book, which I of course don't have on my desk right now, I'll have to find and show you in a minute, is Assessment Principles for Online Learning. And the author is Conrad.
Conrad.
Yeah, Dr. Conrad and Jason Operno.
Mm-hmm.
Type it in, Conrad and Operno. And it's yeah, something like Assessment Principles for Online Learning. It's a red book, excellent book by a previous professor of mine there. Yeah, it's a fantastic program. Athabasca is right at the cutting edge in Canada for online research, distance learning. It's sort of the Canada version of the Open University in the UK. So
yeah, so it's full online.
Assessment strategies for online learning. Yes, there we go.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Giant Conrad, yeah. Giant Conrad.
Yes.
All right, so that's the link, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to access how to assess online learning. Okay, and especially it has authenticity that they mentioned in the book.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was in the program because it's not language learning related. My focus has always been language learning, and then I started this doctorate there, which was on distance education, not really on language learning. So it was interesting to bring in this task-based perspective with people who hadn't really been thinking about task-based learning, but had many of the complementary principles of education from a slightly different field. It was very interesting to learn about. For example, connectivism, constructivism, of course.
Constructionism.
Connectivism is the next sort of big concept in online learning, which is also very fruitful to look at. And I think these principles tie in really nicely with task-based learning.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Marcos. That's an insightful information as well for the book, especially in the assessment of online learning. Okay, we have one more question, I think, for Dr. Ista. Dr. Ista, are you still here?
Hello, Ms. Intan.
Okay, one question from Ms. Salma Maulani. It's how do we motivate students from vocational high school? Okay, maybe to make it contextual, like vocational high school students in Indonesia is quite challenging in terms of reading motivation. And then how to practice ER in order to improve their English, because based on her observation, most of the students is not interested to learn English language. Okay, yeah, here we go.
Okay, thank you so much for your question, Salma. Okay, for vocational high school students in Indonesia, well, we can do both. Like, we can start from what they like first. So what they like to read first. It is okay if they like to read comics, for example, or manga. Anything that they like, horror stories. There are also some applications that they can read books freely based on genres, right? So if they like horror, they like thriller, action, etc., then they can choose that. So we can start from what they like. If they like to read like sport news, automotive, because that's their concentration of study, right? That's okay. But then more importantly, you can encourage them or introduce them to other genre that can help them fluent with their reading skills. We can have graded readers with levels of vocabulary level, and then another thing that we can do is keep motivating the students by telling them stories or living samples of good readers. So I believe that public figures, they love reading so much. So we can tell stories about them and then try to, make their, ask them again about their future goals, right? What they want to be in the future. And then you can relate with stories of successful people who are readers. I think hopefully that answers your question, Salma.
Yeah, I think that's answered the question. That's so interesting, Dr. Ista, about how to bring the profile of successful readers to motivate students reading motivation. Wow. Okay. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are close into the second plenary session. I open one more question for Bapak Ibu. You may raise your hand for one more question to our plenary speakers, for Dr. Ista, Dr. Hyo-Jeong So, and Dr. Marcos. Okay. Well, I think that's have been very clear for all the speakers today. And I do thank you very much for Dr. Marcos, Dr. Ista, and Dr. Hyo-Jeong So for sharing all related to how to integrate technology in our classroom, and especially on how not only to give those of conceptual review, but also these three of you also share the best practices in schools and in the classroom. And we thank you so much for that. I hope that we do well during this challenging COVID-19 for our teaching practices. Okay, so before we close our plenary session, should we have photo together? Could you please open your camera, ladies and gentlemen, and share our best smile so that we can stay happy and stay healthy. Okay. All right, so I will take the pictures. Like we have 5 slides. Okay. Oh, many of you are here. Okay, so slide 1. Okay, and then slide 2. Okay. I love to see your smile, everyone. Slide 3. Yeah, it seems like so many. It's so long. It has been so long. We haven't met anyone. 4, and the last slide. Okay. Well, all right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So this is the end of our plenary session 2. We are heading into the parallel session for all the presenters in this conference. And we may say goodbye to the plenary speakers. We hope that COVID-19 will end soon so we can visit Dr. Marcos and Dr. Hyo-Jeong So directly to Seoul and to Tokyo. Okay. All right.
Thank
See
you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm heading back to the Master of Ceremony.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all the amazing speakers today. That was a very motivating and insightful. So, to all distinguished delegates and lecturers, now we're moving to the next agenda. Please be advised, this is not our last agenda for today. There will be a parallel session. But before I close it, I would like to announce you particular information regarding a parallel session for today. Please kindly take some notes. Parallel A will be in room A with Nindi. Parallel B will be in room B with Fachan. Parallel C will be in room C with Mutia. Parallel E will be in room E with Norman. Parallel F will be in room F with Herbie dan Herbie. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today. Thank you very much for your keen attention and active participations. Stay healthy and don't forget to wear your masks wherever you go. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much.